I'm standing on one side of this gate. And he said, see that road on the other side of that fence? Yeah, he says, Alexander the Great rode his horse down that road. And it just took my breath away. It really did.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today is an old friend who I actually met in Dubai during my master coach training. And I remember that we used to have a lot of very interesting and deep conversations. And when I was preparing for this podcast episode, I went into his Amazon bio, and there is something that I really liked, and it goes like this. It says, life is a journey and we all have a story. Sharing those stories helps others to be brave enough to break their silence. So let's be kind to ourselves and each other. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Rick Sharpe.
Well, thanks for having me. Nice to see you after so long.
I know, it's been a long time. Do you realize that it's 9 years that we finished that course?
Has it been?
Yes.
Yeah, if I do them. Yes, I suppose it's coming up to 9 years actually next month.
So I want to start with a very simple question. I'm from Switzerland and I live in Cyprus, and you're from Canada and you lived in Dubai. We did our training in Dubai. Why were you in Dubai?
Well, originally I was an army brat. So my dad was in the forces in the mid 60s. We lived in Germany for 3 years, and that kind of like put a bug inside me somehow. And then when I got into air traffic control, I looked at working overseas. There's a company in the Middle East called Serco, and they had some job adverts out, and it's just something I wanted to do. I wanted to go overseas, live overseas, and that's why and how I ended up in Dubai.
So air traffic control is your job. That's what you started off with?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. So, I mean, it's one of those things where I have this picture that an Iranian friend painted for me, and it's basically a garden with an open door. I bought this offer because it represents when you have an opportunity and the door is open, you go. Because if the door closes, you always wonder for the rest of your life whether you should have gone through that door, and whether it's good or bad on the other side. It's good to go and find out. If it's not so good, I guess we learn more. If it is good, then it leads to other things. So in that respect, I got the opportunity to go to Dubai, and then one thing led to another, ended up doing a lot of different kinds of jobs, which then involved travel into some pretty interesting places.
So the first overseas job, because you worked as an air traffic controller in Canada initially, and then the first overseas job was Dubai.
It was Abu Dhabi actually for the first 2 or 3 years, and then I moved to Dubai because I got into head office and to head office up to Dubai. So that's how I ended up there.
Air traffic. I always imagine that if I was an air traffic controller, I don't think I could be an air traffic controller because it would stress the life out of me. I have never managed to understand how you guys do this. For somebody who knows nothing about, I love to fly, and I had a few pilots on my podcast, but I've never had an air traffic controller. Can you explain to the people who are listening how this works? Because how many planes does an air traffic controller look after while he works, or how many people are? Just explain. Give me a quick rundown on what it is.
It's interesting because I remember when my daughter was very young, and they were trying to explain what their parents do, and she says, "I'm not really sure what she does. I think he tells people what to do and where to go," and she probably hit the nail on the head by doing that. But I mean, air traffic control is a very highly regulated environment. So as far as number of airplanes, that has a cap, and so that people don't get overworked or overstressed. But you're trained to do it. It's not everybody's cup of tea, so to speak. But at the same time, it's one of these things where I really enjoyed, for the simple reason that even though airline schedules are all the same each and every day, or most days, it was always a very different experience each and every day because of the winds, because of weather, because of the delays, because of various things. So in a nutshell, you have air traffic control that's specialized around an airport. Then you have air traffic control that's specialized outside of an airport that basically lines the aircraft up on final for the people that are working at the airport. And then outside of that, you have air traffic control that works in a wider sort of area space. And they're the ones that are talking to airplanes after you've had your lunch and you're sitting nice and cozy and everything's level and you're flying at 36,000 feet. So that's kind of the way it works. And they all talk to each other.
Has it ever happened to you that, because it's a job where you really have to concentrate, you must not make a mistake, because if you make a mistake, that could be could have very big consequences, serious consequences. Has it ever happened to you that you had to say, I need to leave now, I cannot continue working, like I cannot concentrate, and it would be dangerous if I did? Does that happen?
It's a really good question. And although it's not really happened to me, I mean, when you're working a sector, there's usually one or two people working in a sector, and then we look out for each other. If it gets too busy, or we've had experience where somebody just having a bad day and nothing comes right out of their mouth. So it's like, okay, you're going to work the phones for the rest of the day. We're just going to keep you away from the microphone. But normally, for example, if things do go crazy and you have what we call an incident, then you're automatically, whether it's your fault or not, you're automatically relieved from a sector. Somebody else comes in and sits down, and then they do an investigation and they figure out what went on. But that's just to protect the person, because when those things happen, it does get very high stress, and it could lead to other situations happening. But at the same time, that's a protection system for the employee, for the airline, and it works.
Yeah, because and now I understand. So you're not on your own, like you're not alone responsible for some place. There are other people helping you when in need, or kind of not supervising, but watching it at the same time as you are.
Yeah, well, there's a bigger picture, and also technology lately has really, really come into the mainstream of air traffic control, where there's a lot of stuff out there that does a lot of predicting and identifying conflicts, which helps the controller out. Whereas you pretty much had to be, as you said, on top of your game every single day, every hour, every minute that you were working. And there's a limit on when you can work. You know, the limit is 2.5 hours, then you're forced to take a break. But technology really helps the controller nowadays, and some people sort of balk at that. But it's out there. It's interesting to see how AI will integrate into air traffic control systems, but it's there to help the controller and relieve some of that stress that can build up with larger numbers of airplanes.
Very interesting. So we were talking before we started recording, or when we were talking on the phone, about the places where you've been, and you have been to some fascinating places. One of them is Kabul. I mean, which year were you there, and what was the situation at the time when you were working there? Because right now, I don't think you would want to be there.
I guess that's a matter of debate. I guess, the thing is that we were there looking at a contract. I didn't actually work there, but I was there for a period of time, and a few days actually, and just that experience was really interesting, because I remember standing in the middle of the airport in Kabul, and you're surrounded by mountains, and I'm looking around me, and it's one of those things that what goes through your head is that this is a really surreal place, and you almost feel like you're in a movie. It was just interesting to be there and just experience the brief time I was there, the culture, both on the coalition forces side of things and the local side.
Did you get to mix with locals? Did you get to speak to people in Afghanistan?
Not a lot. There was one day, and I get the question, as you said, you've been in some interesting places. Have you ever felt nervous? And
yes. I mean, have you felt nervous in Afghanistan?
Well, that was there. Like, we lived in a compound that was protected, and to get in and out of the compound, it was very heavily guarded, and you had to go through 5 gates or checkpoints to get into it and out of it. But we had to go to see the Minister of Transportation, and so myself and 3 other guys, ex-military guys, American guys, we go hop into this SUV, blacked out SUV that's armored. And the briefing was, This is a class 2 vehicle, and it'll take small arms fire, no problem. AK-47 fire up to a point. But if anybody sees an RPG, yell left or right, and we vacate the opposite side of the vehicle. So Mr. Civilian from Eastern Canada is listening to this, and RPG being a rocket propelled grenade. And I'm thinking, just a second now, I'm sitting in the back seat of this vehicle, and I've got a shirt and a tie on. And when we exit the compound and we're driving these back streets of Kabul to get to the street transportation, I'm thinking, there's no other blacked out brand new American SUV within probably 3 miles of us. And if we get hit, here I am running around, if I'm still alive, the back streets of Kabul with a shirt and tie on. And that's not really blending with the local population. So was I nervous? Yeah, I was actually. And, we had a great chat with the Minister of Transportation, and we drove back along the same roads we came in on, which didn't make sense to me. And then back into the security of the accommodation, the camp we were staying in. So yeah, that was a bit surreal. And when you've not been in the military, it was one of those things where, are we sure about this? You're talking like rocket propelled grenades and AK-47 machine gun. Okay, all right, let's get this over with. So yeah, that was a nervous point.
I can imagine. And I am not familiar with the military. And my question would have been, what's an RPG? But you explained it. So that must have been scary. And why didn't you why did you have to wear a tie and a shirt? You should have worn one of those things that you could have blended with the locals. But you were
that would make sense. But yeah, I don't know why they did that. If you're going to travel around Afghanistan, you do dress like the locals and you drive a beat up Nissan truck. And that's how you blend. And yes, RPGs are nasty things, especially when they're pointed at you. So no, it's something I would choose to avoid in future.
I would do that too. Now, another place that you mentioned and that has always fascinated me and is actually is a place that I would love to visit is Baghdad, because I think Iraq has people have a very wrong image of Iraq. Am I right? I think it's
Absolutely.
much more modern than people think it is.
Absolutely. When we first got there, it was when I first got there, it was December 2010, and the Americans were pulling out on October the 1st, 2011. So when we first got there, it was a pretty violent place. Americans were still there. The militias were still fighting with each other. There was a lot going on. And we would hear, even in the camp, ours was inside the compound of the airport, but we would hear car bombs and truck bombs going off in the night and various times of the day. So it was a bit sticky, but we were inside a green zone. There were 7 checkpoints you had to go through to get inside the airport itself. So we were, quote unquote, protected in that respect. But over the years, and I was in and out of Baghdad for 12 years, but over the years it changed. And I think the people on the ground there, all they really wanted was their city back. I was there as recently as last year, and it's a city that's almost back to normal. When you're driving around the city itself, you still see a very large police, paramilitary, and military presence in various parts of the city where they have checkpoints and military installations. So that's something you would have to get used to. But the last couple of times I was there, I really got a chance to experience the downtown area, and like any other city, there are places you don't go to, but as a foreign national. But the restaurants are absolutely amazing. The food over the top, and what I loved about Baghdad was that licensed or not or they're not licensed. I mean, you can buy alcohol there if you want it, but all the restaurants are not licensed. And it was interesting to see. It was a very social event when people would go out. The whole family would go out and they would enjoy these restaurants, and everybody would be all dressed up, even the little 5-6-year-olds. You don't see that. It's one of those things where they took pride in their appearance when they went out, and that's one of the things I loved about Baghdad was that a people that's been through so much, and yet they and all of them affected by the wars, managed to still find some reason to smile or some reason to enjoy their lives. And really humbling for me.
I think it's resilience. Resilience is a word that we can use for these areas, the Middle East. I mean, right now, what is happening in Lebanon and the Gulf area. And now I was going to ask you, where does this fascination come from? How, okay, you wanted to find out what it's like when you got your contract, but you stayed for a long time. What is it that you like about this part of the world?
Another good question. It's a very multicultural area because there's a lot of expats living in the Gulf for a lot of different reasons. Not so much in countries like, for example, Kuwait, Saudi to a little bit of an extent, not so much Iraq. But it's that multiculturalism. It's about enjoying the people in their own culture, and they're proud of it. They really are. And it's interesting to hear their stories. And what really strikes me again is not a very, very good friend of mine to this day, Kareem. He's still living in Baghdad. He's got 3 kids, 2 that have emigrated to the United States. And his daughter still lives in Baghdad. And I remember we were sitting one day in his office and we were talking. He was looking out the window and he was got this really, really far away look, some people have when they're trying to remember an experience. He said, I was sitting on a bench. I was in Istanbul and I was watching the ships go up and down the Bosphorus. He said, I was just enjoying the sunshine, green grass all around me, just that feeling of peacefulness. And people walking by me must have thought I was crazy, but just sitting by myself. And then he stopped and he looked at me because the only thing that I wish for my family is to feel safe.
Mm.
Yeah. It's pretty basic and it's something that we all take for granted. And it's one of those things when I go home, I really struggle with conversations, listen to people's recollections of their bad day or the horrible week they had. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea how good you have it. But I can't say that out loud because quite honestly, Elizabeth, it's really not their fault because they don't have that experience. They don't know the difference. So there's some ignorance there when they say that. But in reality, you can crap on Canada or other places to the west and around Europe all you want, but they're pretty good places to live compared to some other places in the world.
This is so true. I mean, I'm from Switzerland, which is, like safety in heaven. So, and I don't know what it's like to be in a war, that this is especially also living here in Cyprus, because here in Cyprus, there has been an invasion only 50 years ago. So it's raw. And I always find it hard to sort of to sympathize because I don't know what it feels like. And the thing that you just said, that this man's only wish is that the family is safe. That is a lot. That is strong. And don't you also agree with me that this part of the world, the Middle East, the Gulf, I don't know, Iran, Iraq, if there wasn't, of course, that's stupid, but if there wasn't any politics, if there wasn't religion, it would be paradise. It's one of the nicest parts of the world.
Well, it is. I even had the luxury of going to Tehran a few years back, and the people are just so kind. I was walking around downtown Tehran. I had a night to myself, and nobody bothered me. I went into this little shisha cafe on the corner, and I couldn't speak Farsi. He couldn't speak English, but we figured out that I just wanted a shisha and a cup of tea, and we managed that, no problem. And I think people just generally want to live their lives, and I don't think that a lot of governments around the world speak for their people, to be quite honest. And Iran is one of those places. Yeah, it's and even in Iraq, it's one of those things where again, some people used to think they were better off under Saddam Hussein because they always had electricity, they always had running water, they always had some of these jobs, for example. So, but the country is slowly getting back on its feet. It still has its issues, like most countries do. But it's just interesting to see how, as you mentioned the word resilience earlier. It's just interesting to see how they manage and how they deal with some of the trauma that they've been through and still go through at times. So it's just amazing. But historically, when I was in Tehran, I visited some of the museums there, and I was just blown away. And the same thing, the last time I was in Baghdad, I got a chance to drive down to Babylon, and they're redoing that whole site. Hardly anybody there, and we got a guy who was his son is fifth generation working at the Babylon site, and he took us behind gates that were locked and stuff. And one of the very surreal things that, and I love history, I do. I'm standing on one side of this gate, and he said, "See that road on the other side of that fence?" Yeah, he says, "Alexander the Great rode his horse down that road." And it just took my breath away. It really did. And that stuff is, that's a 5,000-year-old community. I don't think there's too much now that we're building that's going to be around in 5,000 years. But it just continuously, it fascinates me. It really does.
Fascinating. Now, apart from this part of the world, where does Rick go on holidays? Is your holiday, when you have time off, do you use that time to go back home to Canada, or do you go to other places? Where do you travel to?
Oh, no, I travel. I mean, yeah, I mean, if I get a chance to travel, I do. Of course, you just have to stay connected with people back home, family and stuff. I mean, they're getting older, but I've been away a long time, so it's important to me to sort of keep those connections. I got friends that live in Thailand, which I love. I mean, the people are just so beautiful there, and the food is so amazing. It seems that most places I go to, the poorer the people, the more giving they are, which is really something, because I think they understand what it means to not have, and then when they can, they share. So, and again, that's a really interesting thing that I've run across. Europe, I mean, I love Europe. There's so much history in some of the most beautiful places. Istanbul, Budapest, the history going back generations and generations and generations. The same thing with England. I get caught up watching movies, Game of Thrones and such. You think, when I go around England, for example, you think of what life is really like in medieval times, how they struggled and how they built things, and with those few tools that they have. I mean, history fascinates me. So when I get a chance to do that, I take the opportunity to go. So Africa, I waited for a long time to go to the pyramids. I was back and forth to Cairo for 4 or 5 years. You go down to a place called Luxor, and they have Valley of the Kings. Valley of the Gods, Valley of the Kings. That's it.
Yeah,
and it's just amazing how these different societies existed, side by side almost, without actually having contact with each other. But that one about Alexander the Great, that just blew me away, because he built in the Roman Empire that just spanned, clear across the known world at the time. And but I haven't been to South Africa or South America yet. When I do go, I usually try to go. Malta blew me away. Just the history, the home of the Templar Knights, and the going through a couple of different museums. There was one little sort of town that's been completely renovated in central Malta, and I went into the church there. It took them 100 years to build this church, and the artistry, the paintings on the ceiling, the mosaic work all around on the floors, it was just absolutely stunning. And to think, they did this 300-400 years ago, it's still there. It's just it just continually blows me away. And we're living in a world we can't get it right. History we're supposed to learn from, and we can't get it right.
Yeah, that's something that is actually, that, especially after what we did, becoming better people, helping people to wake up, becoming master coaches. And one thing that I have never understood, why do humans not learn? What is it? Okay, it's a bit of a naive question because deep down we all know what it is. It's power and greed. But don't people realize that nobody lasts, nobody stays forever? Even if you are even if you have the highest power or the most power, you're still going to die and you will disappear. I really never. Sometimes I find it hard to understand the world.
Yeah, well, I don't think we ever will. I think part of the problem is like climate change. Nobody's getting excited about climate change because it's not happening on a weekly basis. It's happening over many, many years. So a lot of people just go on with their lives and they live their lives on automatic, as we used to say, and because it doesn't genuinely affect them on a day-to-day basis. It's a very, very slow, gradual change. Civilizations and societies are the same. So I don't think it's only when we reflect back over time and take, 100 years in perspective, because you can do that when you look back in history, is that you can realize then that, wow, why didn't they do something about it? Well, they really didn't, because they were just basically living it. And the general population, I think, likes to stay out of it. They just want to live their day-to-day lives, most people. In medieval times, I think you had people that just wanted to farm, raise their kids, have them be good people and be good farmers as well. Not realizing that, they were part of a cultural movement that they weren't really aware of because it was much bigger than that. But yeah, I think a lot of that's even happening now. We don't know what the effects are going to be. And even here in the Middle East, who knows what's going to happen a month from now, 6 months from now. We're sitting on a powder keg and we don't know how that's going to go. But everybody still goes about their lives, ironically.
We're both quite close from what's happening in the Middle East. You're in Bahrain at the moment. I'm in Cyprus. I mean, I'm a 20 minutes flight away from Beirut. But yeah, I mean, the thing about people and about humans and that they will never learn, I guess that's not a question that we will manage to answer today or ever. And you are absolutely right. Most people just live on automatic pilot and more or less also from paycheck to paycheck and just kind of wait until it's over, really, when you look at it this way.
If it ever gets over, this is the thing. I know people now that are not going to have kids for the simple reason that the world is so effed up that they don't want to leave their kids, those problems. There's huge issues, huge problems to fix, generations to come.
Yeah, but, that's something that I hear lately quite a lot. But why is that? Because people had children during world wars. Were they less aware? Maybe also because we know too much, because of the internet, because of social media. Because, the situations, life was bad before. There were bad situations in the world during a world war before. It's not just now. And people didn't think about it as much as they do now.
I think it's much more in our face because things are right at our fingertips. So if something happens in the Ukraine 4 hours ago, we all know about it immediately. So it's one of those things where I think we're inundated and we get to choose what we read and what we look at. I mean, I really don't watch TV, to be honest, but I do check the news in the mornings to kind of stay up on top of the Middle East situation because my kids are saying, "Are you sure?" I said, "Listen, I spent a lot of time in Baghdad when it was a conflict zone, and I said I would never put myself in a situation where I would be at risk. So I would be one of those people that would make the call and go." And when I was in Baghdad, as an aside, I was a contract manager there, and when we had situations going on, I was the one that would make the call whether we evacuate or not. And it's a big responsibility because when things are happening, people are looking at you thinking, okay, what's it going to be? And I remember one night, it was about 11 o'clock at night. I was laying in bed and I heard this gunfire and it became more and more and it became louder. And I'm thinking, okay, this is not normal. And then I heard some gunfire inside the perimeter of the airport, some heavier stuff. I said, okay, I'm going to have to get up here. And I got up, and we have this observation deck out of camp. So I got up on the observation deck, looking out sort of over the wall towards the city. And what was interesting is all the tracer bullets were going straight up in the air. They weren't going across the ground, so to speak. So you can draw the conclusion right away that people are shooting at each other. They're just shooting in the air. And I said, okay, well, number one, that's comforting, because initially people were thinking, well, is there a militia trying to break into the airport? But eventually what it was that Iraq was in Bahrain for the soccer or the football world Gulf Cup, and they won their semifinal match. And this is how they celebrate. The only thing is that what goes up comes down, and 60 odd people ended up in the hospital because that stuff came back down, and some people were injured by it. But again, it's one of those things where that's how they celebrate there. I mean, you would never see that in Canada, obviously, because of restrictions on firearms. But here, well, that was a different story.
Wow. That must have been quite scary, though, at the beginning when you heard it. But yes, I have seen that before. I think it's the same in Afghanistan. It's the same in a few places where they shoot in the air because they are celebrating. Yeah, that's different culture. Now we're coming to the end, Rick, but I want to go back. Something caught my attention before when you were talking about AI and air traffic control. Obviously, planes fly on automatic pilot. Pilots don't really do much anymore. So could it be that air traffic control could also is it already a lot of it automated?
There's always a human in the loop. What you have now is cameras at remote airports that provide a visual representation of the traffic around the airport. But you always have somebody behind that doing the communication part of it. There's a lot of communication that's done by computer between the ground and pilots, airplanes, because they have communication links which uploads information. But inevitably, because of, I think there'll always be a human in the loop, because there's always the weather is unpredictable. You never know when, for example, in Canada, a rainstorm is going to turn into an ice storm. You have various things that go on with airplanes. I mean, historically, they're probably the safest way to fly nowadays, but there's always a human in the loop that needs to coordinate what is actually going to happen. There's the other bit too, but like, I mean, would you hop on an airplane with 600 other people knowing there's nobody in the front? Some people, I don't know if society's actually ready for that yet or not. So having two pilots in the front actually flying the airplane gives people a measure of comfort, knowing that there's actually somebody up there that really knows what they're doing. Air traffic control is the same thing. If I was a pilot and I was talking to an AI voice, it doesn't give me, at this point in our history, I guess, a lot of comfort to know that I'm not actually talking to a human being. So I think there's a place for it. Is it going to take over? I don't think so. Not in our lifetime or the next one, I don't think. But you watch these futuristic movies, and who's to say what's going to happen, 50, 60, 100 years from now.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, when we look at what has happened in our lifetime, coming from me, when I was a tour guide working with a telex, and then moving on to a fax, and I was fascinated by, seeing this paper coming out of this machine. And then look at our phone. I mean, all these big rooms that used to be data rooms, and now it's all in a small phone.
I can't get over like everything. We're going to say this. We're going to save it in the cloud. I can't get my head around what the cloud is. It's like, wait, now, like where is this? Where actually is this information?
It's that big data room somewhere in the cloud. If you you want to imagine.
Yeah, now we're
And do you ever wonder, are they going to run out of space?
Well, there's tons of space out there, but how are we going to use it? But there's people that are a lot more smarter than I am that actually develop this cloud theory, or we're actually using the cloud now. So I'm sure they'll come up with something else I mean, you think about, the very first computer I bought was it was 256 kilobytes or something, and now you've got phones that are 100 times more powerful than the original computers. It's crazy.
That's crazy, crazy. Yes, that is so true. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, last question before we end this. What is your favorite place in the world?
There's so many. I mean, there's so many to choose from for different reasons, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's actually it's a stupid question because I don't like it when people ask me, but I thought I'd ask it.
I mean, there's lots of favorites. Is trying to think and identify one that actually stands out. I mean, I do love Dubai because of the multicultural aspect. I mean, I said to somebody the other day that you would have a dinner party. There would be 10 people sitting at your table, and there'd be from like 7 different countries, and which makes for great conversation because, I said earlier, most people are proud of their culture and where they came from, and they love to share stories, and that's part of their journey, and they're sharing that with you. And I go back to Canada and I go to a dinner party and it's full of Canadians. It's just not the same sort of context and color.
Yeah.
I used to say that living in North America was like living in black and white, whereas living in the Middle East was living in color because.
That's beautiful. That is true. That's exactly that's the explanation.
Yeah.
That's such a good way to say it. Yes, I agree with you.
I think any place that leaves you in wonderment, whether it's because of the people or the history, I think is a place. And I try not to go back to places, twice over, but I think it gives you something. I said to my daughter, so if you don't do anything in your life, please travel, because that's probably it's the biggest education.
Definitely.
It's not something you get from books or anything else. You need to go and experience and smell, and feel.
Very true.
And I'm going to close it out. I'm going to close that out because one of the biggest things I love to do is to get up in the morning in a city, whether it's Malta, Budapest, or whatever, at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I like to go for a walk. And just watching the sun come up and watching a city wake up is a really fascinating experience.
That is beautiful. But I have to tell you something, Rick. One of the places that you have not been to and you have promised many, many times to come and visit is Cyprus. And we are all waiting for you here.
That sounds like an invitation again.
Yeah, well, I may stop saying it at some point.
Well, that's true, because that is very true about life. People invite, and then after a while, they stop because it's falling on deaf ears. It's finding the time to go and do it. Because I do know I have some other friends that live in Cyprus as well, and
so it's a place that I always want to.
And maybe okay, you're going to hold me to this. I know it.
Maybe it will become your favorite place in the world, and then we can do another episode, and I can ask you again.
Well, there you go, and nothing ventured, nothing gained. So the challenge is out.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Rick Sharpe.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.